Okay, I am so excited today to introduce you to one of my good friends and business partners, Jim Seyfried. He is the owner and founder of Cornerstone Estate Plans. And Jim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Chris. I appreciate you having me. And I like the fact that you said we're good friends, because even though we are business associates first, I do believe we have become good friends. So thank you.
Of course. You know, I have been talking to my listeners for the last, few of my podcasts, and they were on estate planning. And I understand, most of us understand that estate planning is very important. But when I found you and your company, Cornerstone Estate Plans, you guys offer something that I think is very, very, it's amazing. It's the Safeguard Trust. And before I start talking about the Safeguard Trust, I want to ask you a little bit about Cornerstone. How did you get started with Cornerstone?
Yeah, the story for me goes back to 1993. I was approached by a friend of mine. I was in a different marketing business at that time, and he introduced me to a company called Heritage Estate Plans. And I knew nothing at all about trusts back then. But I learned about it and learned that in general, most people, vast majority of people, don't even have an estate plan, let alone a will or a trust. And I learned back then that if they have no plan, they die what they call intestate, which means the state wherever they're domiciled, wherever they live, has a plan. They may not like it, but if they're going to leave it to the fate of the government, then that's what they've done. Those that have created a will, and again, I did not know this back in the day, but a will is actually the golden ticket to probate court. If you have a will, you have sanctioned your children, your heirs, to go to probate court before they get their assets. I didn't know that. And along came something called a Revocable Living Trust. And that was the document du jour for Heritage Estate Plans at that time. So I got into it, enjoyed it a lot. I knew I was helping people a whole lot, saving money and making the transfer of their assets to their heirs, pretty simplistic. With a trust, it's very simplistic, and was going along fine. And then in 2006, the then owner of Heritage came to me, and he was going to retire and do something else, asked me if I'd like to buy the company, and I did. So in 2006, I bought Heritage Estate Plans. About 4 years after that, in 2010, I developed cancer. And because I had cancer and had some issues with, the treatment and that type thing, I went to, at that time, my best favorite and actually good friend at that time, Ron Johnson, and invited him to become a partner with me in Heritage, knowing I would miss time. And he was gracious enough to accept, and we tried to work him into Heritage because it was a membership association, and we had about 10,000 members. We weren't really sure how to get him into the company. So long story short, what we did in 2012 is we created a sister company to Heritage that we called Cornerstone Estate Plans. And that was the beginning of Cornerstone in 2012. And it acts very similar to our sister company Heritage, that they're both membership associations. And we work through attorneys because we're not a law firm. We have to have an attorney draft the document. But basically, that was the beginning of Cornerstone. And unfortunately, I lost Ron a year ago yesterday, actually, passed away. And so now the company is solely owned by myself again. And that's kind of the background into Cornerstone.
Yeah, you mentioned Ron, and Ron is actually the person that I met in the beginning. He's the one that introduced me to you, but I was intrigued with the reason why a lot of people don't do estate planning. The reason why they don't do it is because they think that it's only for, people that have a lot of money. And even though those are the ones that most of the time have it, except for, we've seen lately, who just passed away not too long ago that didn't have an estate plan? I know Prince, but there was somebody that just passed away.
Well, yeah, that's I mean, you can climb on the web and find that out pretty simply. But yeah, just most people, Chris, just have not. They leave it to fate. I'm not sure why that is. They work their entire life to build up an estate. They hope to pass something on to their children, but then they don't take the time. In fact, I heard one time, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard one time that most people spend more time planning a vacation, an upcoming vacation, than they do protecting their assets and when they pass away. And it's probably true because, again, even though I've been doing this for 31 years now, the vast majority, something like 70 or 80% of people have nothing. They have absolutely nothing in place for their estate. So it is pretty incredible. On the other hand, there's a huge market. So kind of works both ways. But yeah, Ron at that time, he handled new representatives. He handled new people coming in and working with Cornerstone. And so, yeah, you would have met Ron first, and he did a great job. He was just an affable, kind, honest, fine person. And the Lord really did me a plus when he put me in touch with Ron back in the day. That's for sure. But miss him terribly, and I know he's in a good place now. So
he taught me a lot about the reason why just having a will is, the people that do have a will out there. You mentioned it before about that is their golden ticket to probate.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that, but it's like when I learned about the trust that you guys offer and how it works, as I was learning about the different types of trust, I realized that this trust actually seems like it has almost several different types of trust all in one. It's kind of, Ron always called it a hybrid trust.
Yeah.
And the one thing about that I learned that I thought was pretty cool is the price, the cost. Okay. So we can bring this to average people. Everybody can use this trust, but we can also bring this to people that don't have a lot because of the cost, the membership, I kind of call it a loophole. It's like we found a loophole, a way to be able to help people without them having to go and spend. Like this trust, if they had to go to the courts, would cost them anywhere from $7,500 to $15,000, depending on where they're getting it in the United States. So, just being able to do that with our clients has been so helpful. We offer it actually to all of our clients. Can you tell us what the difference is between this Safeguard Trust and other trusts?
Yeah, certainly. Chris and Ron was, very accurate calling it a hybrid because there's basically two types of trusts. One is a revocable living trust and one is an irrevocable trust. And most everyone, financial planners, people like that, understand what a revocable living trust is. Basically, people do a revocable living trust to really keep their children, as we talked about earlier in today, out of probate. That's kind of the impetus people would use to get into a revocable living trust. It allows the transfer of the property to the heirs very, very simply when they pass away, and there is no probate involved at all. In fact, I've settled personally over 750 estates now, and to date, knock on wood, there has not been an attorney take a penny out of the estate and settling it with a trust through us. So that's the reason for a revocable living trust.
One thing I want to say about the revocable living trust I know I said Safeguard. One thing I want to say about that is my father had a revocable trust. He spent over $7,500 for this revocable trust. And and they had to do everything. That's the one thing I love about you, as you help our clients go through the whole process. They had to do pretty much everything. They had to transfer everything into the Safeguard, into the revocable trust. But when I realized, I asked myself, why did you get this trust? What was the purpose? And this is what I ask my clients this too all the time. Why did you get this trust? And the first thing they say is, well, I wanted to make sure that my kids are taken care of. And I also, if we ever get sued, I want to make sure that, we don't have it in our name.
Yeah.
And I immediately was like, oh my goodness, you have a revocable trust. We got to fix this, because there's no asset protection. And people don't realize that. Most people think when they got a trust that it's not just for their kids. They think that they have asset protection. And when we tell them that they don't, it's very eye-opening. But anyways, go ahead, back to the Safeguard Trust.
Yeah, no, I'm going to hitchhike on what you said. And yeah, you're exactly right. Again, having done this now in my 31st year, I can tell you that the hair on the back of my neck stands up when I hear some of the things that attorneys have told their clients. But, having said that, Chris, we do kind of an unkind thing to attorneys that we don't do to doctors. If I have cancer, I'm not going to a podiatrist, I'm going to an oncologist. But people think with an attorney, because they're an attorney, heck, they know about lawsuit litigation with accidents, they know about divorce, they know about estate planning. No, they don't. In fact, none of those things are in the, to take the law courses in college, they don't go through any specifics like that. An attorney specializes in the field they get into after they get out of law school and into their practice. So, unfortunately, again, we assume that the attorney that did our divorce for us is also an estate planning attorney, and typically they're not. The fact that people think with a revocable living trust they have asset protection, that actually, Chris, is a pretty common view, believe it or not. What I like to tell people is, well, let me ask you a question. With your revocable living trust, if you want to take money out of your trust and go on vacation, can you do it? And they say, well, yeah, of course. And I say, well, then your creditors can get at the money too, can't they? And they go, and the light bulb comes on. They go, oh, I never thought of that. I said, yeah, it's not an asset protection document. It's protection from probate court, but that's it. So that's kind of, what I talk to them about. Anyway.
Can you tell me how the Safeguard Trust came about in the first place?
Yeah, I can. Again, when I bought Heritage in 2006, and again, I made a point to talk to as many of my members back then, about 10,000 of them that I possibly could, just kind of introduced myself with a letter, and if they wanted to talk, wonderful. And again, in general, many of them felt that the Revocable Living Trust offered asset protection. And again, anytime you understand this because you have a company with representatives underneath you, and you can train someone as much as you want. What they say when they get out in the field can be totally different. And a salesperson, especially a commissioned person, when they get out in the field, they become a little bit greedy toward their commission. And yeah, is this asset protection? Well, sure. Yeah, it'll cover, and they kind of skim over it and that type thing. So again, when I bought the company in 2006, I realized that, the common thread was all my members back then had a revocable living trust. And when I would talk to them, they would say, now, if I go into a nursing home, I'm protected, right? And I would say, no, you're not. And so I spent a goodly part of my time when I first bought Heritage researching a way to protect their assets. I had no idea at that time that there was such a thing as this type of safeguard trust. But I read every book I could find from the library and online from attorneys, and the one trust that kept popping up again and again was something called an income-only Medicaid trust. And there was a book written by H. Gabriel Heiser, Heiser, that really caught my attention. He wrote the book in understandable English, not legal terms. And so I actually wrote him and sent him an email. He had his email address in his book. I sent him an email and said, dear counselor, I think I've read your book. Very interesting. I said, I think there's a fit between what you write about in your book and my members. I'd love to talk to you about it. Well, the next day, my phone rings, and on the caller ID, it says Heiser. I about fell off my chair. But I realized quickly why he called, and he said, Jim, I understand you're interested in buying a whole lot of my books. I said, well, yes, I'm interested in buying your book, but not 10,000 of them. I said, what I'm really interested in is in your book, you talk about this very specifically written hybrid, irrevocable income only Medicaid planning trust. I said, I drive a car. I know how to drive the car, turn the key on, things like that, but I can't repair it. I said, you talk about this trust, which is very interesting to me, but can you draft one? And he said, well, yeah, absolutely. That's what I did for 30 years. That was my expertise in my law practice, was drafting what they called a Medicaid-friendly trust. I said, great, that's what I'm interested in. So I explained to him what we do with our members, and I said, here's my concern, counselor. I said, we've got 10,000 members nationwide in every state of the union. How on earth can they qualify in every state? I'm guessing every state's laws are somewhat different. He said, well, good news, Jim. He said, no, they're not. He said the Medicaid laws are federal, and each state can be less restrictive than the federal law, but not more restrictive. He said, I'll give you an example. The state you're in of Illinois, it used to be a 3-year look-back period for Medicaid. Now they've gone to 5, but Illinois has stayed more lenient at 3-year, which they can do. What they cannot do is go to like a 7-year look-back and be more restrictive than the federal law. So he said, the fact that the trust is drafted according to U.S. Code Title 42, Health and Welfare Code, Chapter 7, specifically on Social Security, it works in every single state of the union. I said, great, wonderful. Now the only thing we have to come up with is a price. And so he and I negotiated back and forth on that, and the Safeguard Trust came into existence, and it's now copyrighted through Cornerstone, and that's how it came to be.
Some people think, though, Medicaid is now, so we're talking about trusts too. Those are only for the rich. People think that, right? Misconception. Mm-hmm. And now Medicaid is only for the poor. Now, can you explain that? Because a lot of clients, they actually have a lot of money, but why would they want to have something like this, a safeguard trust?
Well, for the same reason they have life insurance. To me, having a safeguard trust, Chris, is no more or less than a transfer of risk. In fact, I like to talk to my people about that. It's a transfer of risk. Why do people, have life insurance? Most people can afford the few doctor visits, things of that nature, but they have, or what happens if I die, that type thing, or health insurance, or homeowners insurance, or car insurance. All those insurances are nothing more than a transfer of risk. You're transferring the risk of you, totaling out your car and having to pay for it from your shoulders to an insurance company's shoulders for a lot less per year. So that's kind of what this is all about. If, in fact, 7 out of 10 people will need long-term care, whether they have a bunch of money or not, here's the question. Would you rather, if potentially you have a 7 out of 10 chance of needing long-term care, and the average stay is just under 3 years, and the average out of pocket for that under 3 years is about $240,000. So Mr. and Mrs. Rich folks, even though you can afford $240,000 out of your pocket, because you can, would it make more sense for you to spend $5,000 one time to mitigate that risk? What makes the most sense to you?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Isn't Medicare or Medicaid, isn't that not such great healthcare? A lot of healthcare with Medicaid is not very good.
Yeah, and again, Chris, that is an objection. There's no question about that. But if you look up the law, the federal law, I've got a mother-in-law in the nursing home right now, and none of the staff or even the people in the main administrator does know, but none of the staff, none of the nurses that come in and take care of her know what her status is, whether she's on self-pay or whether she's on Medicaid. It's illegal for them to know that, number one. It's illegal for them to give her different food than the general population or things of that nature. So, no, that's misnomer, quite frankly, that is, pretty common. And that's the fact that if the nursing home has Medicaid beds, it's illegal for them to differentiate treatment, food, or anything else from Medicaid to self-pay. They can't do it. Now, I will tell you that Medicaid does only allow for a dual bed, so you have someone in the room with you. So one thing the kids can do if mom or dad qualifies for Medicaid is they can upgrade mom to a single room. There's no question about that. So even though mom or dad is qualified under Medicaid, the children can certainly upgrade mom or dad. And of course, there's a way to do that through the Safeguard Trust, which, it's called the backdoor provision, where with the Safeguard Trust, you can gift money to your heirs to be used however they choose to. So even that's covered. But you are right. Most people think Medicaid, poor quality service, where in fact, by law, it cannot be that.
It's interesting because I have a personal experience with this, and I think many people can relate to this. My grandmother, she was 98 years old. She worked. She always worked. She worked with my grandfather, and they always paid in to, Medicaid, Medicare. They paid to be able to have this health care all their lives. And, mentally, she was there all the way up until she passed away. But the thing that got me was with her Medicare. I shouldn't say it got me because I knew that this was going to happen, but there was nothing that I could do about it because of that 5-year look back. However, the Medicare, they took care of her for a little bit, but Medicare basically shuts off, and they're like, okay, you go home, because she didn't want to be in the hospital anymore. But they will not pay for any home care. They won't spend a cent on home care. They will pay for you to be put on hospice. They'll pay for you to be put down. That's how I felt about it. If she would have had Medicaid, she could have they actually pay for home care.
Yes.
On Medicaid. And it's just like, I have to explain that to my clients all the time. It's not so much, maybe you don't want your family to be in a nursing home. You want them to be home with you, but you need help. It's very hard to be a caretaker. And if you don't have the money, or if she didn't, her whole thing was, I don't want to spend all what I've worked for that I want to leave to my family. I don't want to use it. And I don't want to lean on my property. I don't want any of that. She would not let us bring anybody in the home. I mean, she was like, unless she could pay for it, she did not want to bring anybody in. And I was just sad about it, because it's like Medicare basically just sends people home to die, and because they'll pay for the hospice, but no home health care. That's was a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I will say, when Medicare and Medicaid were signed into law by President Johnson back in 1965, at that time, Medicaid was touted as a program for indigent people. That's how it came into being. But those laws have changed over the years, and now the government says that if anyone divests themselves, they give their assets away to anyone, their children or whomever, and wait 5 years, then they will qualify. And that's what they call a 5-year look back. So we kind of, hitchhike on that, the fact that, you can divest yourself of your assets and qualify after 60 months. That's the look back period. The difference between giving it to your children and losing total control of your assets and having no say in selling your home or anything like that is the fact you can divest your assets into this Safeguard Trust, keep control of your assets, things of that nature, and still qualify. So that it's kind of a win-win all the way around. So that's
Yeah, there's a lot of amazing things about the Safeguard Trust. The other is, like, people feel like if they were to put their everything they give, I always tell people, haven't you ever heard that saying, like, the poor and middle class, they want to own everything, and the wealthy, they own nothing. I mean, there's a reason for that. They put them in trust. They put them in these different places because if they ever get sued or ever, they're going to, and the cool thing about this trust is that they get to wear three hats. And I love that. They get to be the grantor. They get to be the trustee,
right,
and the beneficiary.
Yep.
And it's, that is something that if traditional irrevocable trust, that's not the case at all. And Ron used to tell me about stories of people that had irrevocable trust. And I mean, their life was just, they weren't taken care of the way they needed to be taken care of because maybe they had a child or a grown child that wasn't willing to take care of which is sad. It's sad that kind of stuff even happens, but it's cool. We get the benefits of having an irrevocable, like nobody. We have asset protection, but we also have the awesome benefits that come with a revocable trust.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, and you know this all the time, yes, you can, with a standard irrevocable trust, you cannot be the manager, the trustee of your trust. You have to have a third party, which means you have no control over the assets you put in there. They're gone, basically. Where with this one, because it is a hybrid, as you've said before, Chris, they can wear all three hats. They can wear the hat of the trustee and manage the assets within it, so they don't lose control of anything. Plus the fact it is a grantor trust, and this is again just a huge benefit of this particular hybrid document. That's the fact that even though it's an irrevocable trust, and the knee-jerk reaction for most bankers and financial planners is, irrevocable trust, you have to get what they call an EIN number because the trust has to be identified by its own tax number, which is not the case with the safeguard. That is the case with a standard irrevocable trust, absolutely. But with the safeguard, no. You can it can use your social security number for the tax ID number. Why is that a big deal? Because now you can continue just filling out a 1040 return every year instead of two forms, a 1041 for the trust with its own EIN number and then your own tax number. So it's a huge advantage to be a grantor trust, which ours is, which other irrevocable trusts are not. So yeah, there's big advantages to this particular safeguard hybrid trust, no question about it.
Well, I'm so glad that you found that book and you contacted that lawyer and he actually called you back.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you tell me what kind of person would not be interested in having one of these? What kind of person might not be good fit for this kind of trust? Is there anybody?
Yeah, well, again, I think what it comes down to, Chris, honestly, is person, not interested. First of all, it seems like before we hit 65, we're not concerned about our, mortality at all. So people under the age of 65 just aren't concerned with long-term care. They may be concerned about asset protection, which, by the way, I should mention, it works for Medicaid after the 5-year look-back period, but it's an asset protection document from day one. From the day they sign it, there is no look-back period for asset protection. So it's an asset protection document immediately. But I think, the person that's not interested either is too young, or they do not believe the statistic that 7 out of 10 people will need some sort of long-term care, which again, you can peel off the web. You just Google, how many people need long-term care. It's right on there and in different, and that's a good third-party leave behind also. Or they think, my mom and dad didn't need it. I'm healthy. I'm not going to need it. It's called, denial. But the way I market to those people, Chris, and again, some will, some won't, so wait, you move on. But I think the best way to market it to people in general is really a transfer of risk. If I've talked to someone for a while in their home and I just can't seem to get through to them, one thing I've been able to do pretty successfully is I'll say, listen, let's pretend that instead of me coming here this evening talking about a trust, I came into your home tonight to talk about long-term care insurance, because we know that statistically the odds are pretty strong you'll need long-term care, and you have an interest in it. Maybe you've looked into it, and they go, yeah, really expensive, which it is, no question about it. But I'll say, let's pretend that I came here tonight talking about a long-term care policy. And this policy is going to cover both of you from the day you go into the nursing home or you need long-term care at home, either one, and it covers all the expenses. And instead of paying for it either monthly or yearly every single year like normal long-term care insurance, this is a really unique policy that's a one-time policy paid up in full, and it's $5,000. Now, here's my question to you. How long will it take you to run and get your checkbook? And they understand that. They understand it if you talk to them as far as selling them a long-term care policy, because even though this is not that, it acts like that. And they know the cost of long-term care insurance. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, when I look at this trust, I really feel like I told you, as I was learning, and we did a podcast on this, we went through the different types of trusts, and I realized that this trust has like almost several trusts in one.
Mm-hmm.
All of my clients, everybody that works with me has one of these trusts because I believe in it. I believe it's, I want to make sure that their assets are protected because we work way too hard to just be giving them away to the medical.
Yeah.
I have MS and I can afford to go here to the doctor. I can afford, but I don't want to spend all my money on medical. It's like, I would rather be able to give that money to somebody else and be able to, give it to places that I care about.
Yeah.
And I need it on medical. $50 for a cotton ball. Just little things that I would prefer. And plus, I've already paid into Social Security. I paid into Medicare. I want the benefits that I already paid for. And I want that for my clients too. So
right. Yeah, no, that's you. You are, I love working with you. You've taken the time to learn the product. It's not like cancer insurance. If I have cancer, it pays. If I don't, it doesn't. There's some things to learn about this, and you have taken the time to do it, which I certainly appreciate. And you've got a good handle on it. I should mention a couple of other unique things about the Safeguard. It's also something called intentionally defective. And people go, oh, why would I want to buy an intentionally defective trust? That's a legal term. That means that, for instance, again, with a standard irrevocable trust, there is no, if your home is in a standard irrevocable trust and you pass away, your kids get the home at what you paid for it back in the day, not what it's worth when you pass away, because it did not get a step up in basis, which is what that is, which means if they sell the home, they would have huge capital gains to pay from what you paid for it to what it's worth when they pass away. Again, because of the language in the Safeguard Trust, it does get a step up in basis. So your children inherit your home at what it's worth when you pass away, eliminating capital gains. The other thing is, it's also something called a spendthrift trust, which simply means that your children cannot have their potential inheritance attached, either in divorce court or a lawsuit, car accident, whatever. So even their assets are safe. And one of the unique things about a trust in general, Chris, and I know you know this, as opposed to a will, is if your client's going through a divorce and they have a will, once it comes out the back end of the cornucopia horn and pays them, there's no way of holding what they're going to inheritance in probate court. They're going to receive the assets, which means they may lose them then if they're going through a court case, divorce, or whatever, where with a trust, assets can be held in the trust for 21 years after the last heir dies, which is a really, really, really long time. So if one of the heirs is going through a financial problem, the trustee of the trust can just hold that asset until that legal problem clears and then give them their assets. So that's another huge benefit of the trust.
There was something else that remember reading about. And it was, it talked about the intentionally defective trust.
Right.
It has a loophole that allows people to receive income from certain trust assets, which is what you're talking about, the spendthrift. But also it says that the grantor pays income tax on the generated income, but the estate doesn't incur any estate taxes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah. And you're right. That's the intentionally defective language. The estate actually stays in the grantor's estate, which means that there is no trust, federal estate tax trust, which is really, really higher than the individual, much, much higher a tax rate. So yeah, that's another huge advantage, which is, again, the fact that it's a grantor trust. That's what that means. So it stays in the grantor's estate, not the trust's estate. So yeah, you're exactly right. Yep.
well, Jim, I appreciate you so much taking the time today. I have been telling people about this, and I thought I just need to get you on here and be able to talk about this trust. And I know that you have representatives all over the United States.
Mhm.
And so I want to say, I mean, if people want to get this, they can go to one of your representatives or somebody that's brought it to them. Like I said, every client that I work with, when they need estate planning, this is included in their estate plan. So,
Chris, and I think that's such a wonderful thing. We're going to do a Zoom podcast, I think, with you on there and talk about why you do that. I think I'd love it to have all my representatives do that. I think it's such a great idea because I think every one of my other reps, they also market annuities or things of that nature on the back end, which is great, and for that reason, yeah, if you, include the trust as part of their financial planning package with them, it's just that's a great idea, Chris. And you're seeing the big picture, which is terrific on your part. I congratulate you on having that vision.
well, I appreciate that. And Jim, thank you again so much for joining us today. If anybody is interested in this kind of estate plan and you've already spoke to a Cornerstone representative, get back with them. But if not, and you're interested, reach out to us. CQ Consulting, we are here. We are here for you. And we just want to make sure that you're protected. So thank you so much for listening. Check us out on Instagram. Check us out on Facebook. Give us a like and share if you know anybody that needs this information. Have a good day.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much.